This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. Journalist and author Jonathan Allen talks about Hillary Clinton's political hit list and her tenure as Secretary of State. With extreme conservatives losing a key House vote on the debt ceiling and Senator John Cornyn cruising to likely victory in the March 4th Texas primary, political science professor Alan Abramowitz says the Tea Party may be on the wane. And Bill Press talks with The Nation's George Zornick about Afghanistan. Are you tired of Tea Party Republicans and Rush Limbaugh dominating the airwaves? Do you want the facts you won't get on Fox or even on CNN? Then stay tuned. Our sponsor, 21st Century Democrats, works hard to get everyday Democrats involved in returning our party to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Sit back and listen, then stand up and fight. And follow 21st Century Democrats on Facebook for all the latest progressive news. We're glad you can join us. Jonathan Allen is an award-winning journalist and author of a new political biography of Hillary Clinton. He tells us about her tenure as Secretary of State, about her political hit list, and what they mean for her likely presidential run. And we welcome Jonathan Allen, who's a White House and political reporter for Bloomberg News and the co-author of a fascinating new book called HRC, State Secrets and the Rebirth of Hillary Clinton. Jonathan Allen, thanks for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
It's always good to be with you.
You know, you and your co-author, Amy Parnes, have written about the Clinton family hit list of Democrats who did not support her run against Barack Obama in 2008 when they thought they should have. Is it usual for a politician to keep track of who his or her friends and enemies are?
Usually politicians keep track of the people that they like, that they help, that help them, and those who don't. Some of them are more methodical about it than others. In this case, aides to Hillary Clinton were very methodical, creating a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet and ranking people from 1 to 7, with 1 being the most loyal, the people who did the most to try to support her campaign in 2008, and 7 being the least loyal. And then over time, as we described in the book, and I think this is one of the more interesting features, one of the better sort of narrative arcs, leitmotifs, if you will, in the book, Bill Clinton went around and started knocking them out in primaries, supporting the Democrats that were running against them in primaries. And there are several cases where incumbent Democratic members of Congress lost. In one case, Bill Clinton endorsed the opponent to a Democratic Pennsylvania Attorney General candidate who had been in Congress, had lost his seat, then ran for Attorney General and found Bill Clinton fighting him from the other side. So this is something they're very serious about, something they keep track of. And I would say, in part because of the number of other politicians that they deal with and other people in the world that they deal with, it's more important for them to really catalog who's sort of on the naughty and nice list, because you couldn't just keep it in your head like most politicians do.
Right. How damaging do you think that reputation for hit list or hardball politics will be to her?
Well, it plays both ways. Within the Democratic Party, it means that there are people who are going to be less willing to cross her. We quote some folks on that in the book, that this has a chilling effect on people who might, members of Congress and other politicians who might endorse a primary opponent. They have to think twice. Will there be political retribution from the Clintons later on if they seek to go with somebody else? On the other hand, in the general election, it may not look as good. We've seen a lot of stories lately about politicians who exact revenge on their political adversaries. I think this is at least a little bit different in that you're talking about the main punishment being hurting political officials, not hurting regular people.
Two examples of the Clinton wrath against Obama supporters involve Senator Claire McCaskill and former Congressman Jason Altmaier. What are their stories, and is time healing any wounds from 2008?
With Claire McCaskill, the basic story is that the Clintons had been helpful to her in trying to run her race in 2006, raising money, things like that. She went on Meet the Press and said that she wouldn't want her daughter in a room with Bill Clinton, which caused some consternation back in 2006 and 2008. She endorsed Obama, and that sort of cut the cord between the two sides. And then, more recently, she's been trying very hard to get back in the Clinton fold. She came out very early and endorsed Hillary Clinton for 2016. She's been going to Clinton Global Initiative events. The Clintons were not helpful to her in her last election, and that she won, but she barely won over a pretty weak opponent. And so there was she actually survived. She lived to tell. Jason Altmaier, on the other hand, he actually stayed neutral in the 2008 primary, but the Clintons felt he owed them something. He had been on Hillary's healthcare task force in the 1990s when he was a staffer on Capitol Hill, and they really courted him. They gave him sort of all the privileges during the primary, rides with Bill Clinton, FaceTime with Hillary Clinton, and he ended up not endorsing. So when he ended up in a closely contested primary race in 2012, Bill Clinton endorsed his opponent, Mark Pritz. At the time, Altmaier was seen as the front runner, but Pritz vaulted ahead of him on the strength of Bill Clinton's endorsement. Talk to anybody there, they say the Clinton endorsement was the pivotal thing. Even Altmaier to this day. Altmaier says he's a fan of Hillary Clinton's. Of course, he's no longer in a position to be a superdelegate for her because he's no longer in Congress. So two different stories, but that we track in the book. But there are actually a lot more of the sort of that kind of fun story of political betrayal and payback.
We're speaking with Jonathan Allen, White House and political reporter for Bloomberg News, co-author of the new book, HRC, State Secrets and the Rebirth of Hillary Clinton. You can check it out at hrcbook.com. Is there an essential difference between who Hillary Clinton supporters are and who supported Bill? And are there differences in Bill's and Hillary's approach to governing?
I think that there are differences in who his supporters are and her supporters are. I'm not sure that they necessarily fall neatly into particular categories. Certainly, it would seem that she has probably a stronger core among women voters who really form a strong base for her. But it's hard to tell at some level because Bill Clinton was first elected in 1992. In order to have voted for him in 1992, you basically got to be older than 40 right now. There are a lot of voters who didn't vote for Bill Clinton either time, or who certainly didn't vote for him twice, who are key parts of the Democratic constituency at this point. I haven't seen a real comparison of those two things, but I think there's probably some difference. Now, in terms of their approach to govern, I think there's a core Clintonian philosophy of trying to bring all of the pieces of a civil society together to get things done. That means the government works, the private sector works, academic institutions, nonprofits, that all of those pieces of society sort of have to be working together and partnering to get major things done. And I think that's it's different than the Democratic Party, which tends to take a dimmer view of the corporate world. It's different than the Republican Party, which takes a dim view of government's role in society. And so it's a real interesting melt. I think they both sort of share that view. I do think there are differences in the way that they solve problems, in the way that they take in information. I think Bill Clinton's very much big on vision, and he's a charming guy. I think Hillary Clinton is more studious, more the hard worker, more somebody who is very good at applying other people's ideas to various situations and figuring out how to take a lesson learned from one situation and apply it to another. So I think there are some personal differences in the way that they operate, but I don't think that there are huge differences in the way that they were governed or their worldview.
Who would you say are the main money people and the strategists closest to Hillary Clinton?
It's a great question. Those are, sort of two different questions. In terms of strategists, I think there are a few people who are going to be very close to her. She runs for president again. Guy Cecil was her political director in 2008. He's been the head of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee for the last few years. He's somebody who's viewed as a possible campaign manager for her. Robbie Mook, who just ran Terry McAuliffe's successful bid for governor, also mentioned as a possible campaign manager. Certainly somebody who would likely join the campaign. You've got Mignon Moore, who came out of the Clinton White House, actually came out of the Rainbow Push Coalition in the old days, who's very close to Hillary personally, and works at the Dewey Square Group. I think, the real power behind them all will be Cheryl Mills, who was the chief of staff and counselor, two important roles at the State Department under Hillary. She's somebody who I think, whatever happens will be the real power behind the curtain. As far as big fundraisers go, there's probably no one in America with a better Rolodex, save possibly Barack Obama, of high dollar fundraisers ready to give money. I mean, Susie Tompkins Buell, the founder of Esprit, is one of Hillary's big donors. I think Tom Steyer, big pro-environment guy out of California, is somebody who's going to be a big donor to her. Elizabeth Bagley, former ambassador, is one of her big funders. Jose Villarreal comes out of Texas. Used to be on the Walmart board, is one of her big funders. The list goes on and on and on and on. I think that one thing that can be said that will be true is that Hillary Clinton is not going to have any trouble raising money if she runs for president.
Right. Yeah. There's a track record with the Clintons in raising money. Is it significant that the Obama Political Action Committee has melded into the Hillary Clinton organization? It's
very significant, and we talk about this in the book, that you've seen really the Democratic establishment, whether they were originally Hillary Clinton people or Barack Obama people, really come behind Hillary Clinton in the last several months, starting with Priorities USA, the super PAC that was founded to help re-elect Obama, now run by Jim Messina, his 2012 campaign manager, and Buffy Wicks, one of his field organizers, now at Priorities, and really, which is, sort of has the explicit desire to elect a Democratic president, but is really clearly being pushed in that direction for Hillary Clinton. There's a group called Correct the Record that does the her communications combat, before there's any actual campaign going on, that's swung in behind her. I think what you're seeing is the Democratic Party really, a lot of the Democratic Party, particularly the establishment, move behind her. I think there's, still within the progressive movement, the desire to see somebody else at least challenge her, but nobody seems to be stepping up to that challenge at the moment.
Is she the inevitable Democratic nominee, or is there a danger of her peaking too soon?
I don't know if it's necessarily peaking too soon, but you got to. They say that's why you play the game. You've got to run the race to win, and unless nobody else jumps in. I think there is a danger in terms of neither of the Clintons has ever been particularly popular in Iowa, which is the first caucus state. So somebody else could conceivably go in, win Iowa, and start to build some momentum. But there's nobody on the horizon right now that looks nearly as strong as Barack Obama did, after winning the Senate election in 2004, and certainly not as strong as he did after after a couple years in the Senate. So trying to figure out who that person on the horizon is difficult.
Mm-hmm. How do you rate her chances of becoming president? You knew we were going to have to grab one of those on you, right?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I mean, her chances of becoming president, it would be probably as I would say she's got the greatest chance of becoming president of anybody who's discussed for that job right now. Whether that's that's somewhere I would argue south of 50%. Say like a plurality possibility, but certainly a higher percentage than anybody else.
Okay. Jonathan Allen, White House and political reporter for Bloomberg News, co-author of HRC, State Secrets and the Rebirth of Hillary Clinton. You can check it out at hrcbook.com. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time with us today on americasdemocrats.org. Look forward to having you back sometime soon.
My pleasure. Take care.
Okay, you as well. And this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for Stand Up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Do you want to get involved and help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box? You can make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future and help us keep this show going and to elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. Political science professor Alan Abramowitz has been studying the Tea Party and thinks it's reached its peak of influence and is on the way down. We'll talk to him about that in just a moment. Right now, we turn to Jim Hightower, America's #1 populist, for his common sense commentary.
In The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy assessed the odd things she was experiencing and said to her little dog, "Toto, I've a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore." Lately, Senator Pat Roberts has gained a new understanding of what Dorothy meant. The Kansas Republican has been in the U.S. Senate for 18 years and was in the House for 16 years before that. So he's been away for a long time. And now that he's running for another 6-year Senate term, Roberts has learned that the Kansas he thought he was from, a state of relatively moderate Eisenhower-style Republicans, has become the political land of right-wing Oz. A rabidly extremist, coke-headed Tea Party Republicanism has taken hold of the GOP's primary process and blown out the moderates. The upshot for Roberts is that Republican voters are now hard-right, howl-at-the-moon lunatics who demand ideological purity over everything else. Worse for Pat, they've put up one of their own to run against him in the August primary. But by gollies, the senator is fighting back. Unfortunately, not by standing on principle and refusing to be intimidated by crazies. Instead, Roberts has put on his crazy pants, altered his beliefs, and is dancing like a fool with the ideologues. He recently opposed the farm bill he helped write. He joined the certifiably goofy Ted Cruz of Texas in the silly political stunt that shut down the government of the USA last October. And he even became part of the Tinfoil Hat Club by voting against a United Nations treaty to ban discrimination against people with disabilities. This is Jim Hightower saying, come on, Pat. You've been in Congress for 34 years. You're 77 years old, and you're getting a gold-plated pension for the rest of your life. Is 6 more years in the Senate really worth selling out people with disabilities? Not to mention selling out your own integrity?
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. How much farther can the Tea Party go in dominating the GOP? Professor Alan Abramowitz thinks their influence is on the downswing, and maybe the recent House vote for a clean debt limit increase proves him right. And joining us now on americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats, Alan Abramowitz is the Alban W. Barkley Professor of Political Science at Emory University and author of The Disappearing Center, Engaged Citizens, Polarization, and American Democracy. He's also written an article outlining the threat to Republicans from the Tea Party. Alan Abramowitz, thanks very much for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
I'm glad to be with you.
You know, you point to the battle over Obamacare as a success for the Tea Party in terms of pushing the Republican establishment into a government shutdown, but that didn't repeal the law. So what is the Tea Party standing today?
Well, I think the end game of that crisis was not a good one from the standpoint of the Tea Party. After having kind of pushed the leadership in Congress into moving ahead with the shutdown, and then ultimately when the leadership decided that they had no choice but to basically cave in and agree to reopen the government and raise the debt ceiling, I think it hurt at least temporarily hurt the standing of the Tea Party in the country and I think in Congress. And we saw the Speaker, especially later after the vote on the budget agreement, which occurred of course, a few weeks later, stand up and actually make some very critical comments about some of the outside groups, especially that had been pushing for the shutdown and then opposing the budget agreement. So I think that it's fair to say, I think that the Tea Party really took a hit during that whole government shutdown, debt ceiling crisis, and then in the subsequent debate over the budget agreement.
Give us the dimensions of the Republican dilemma in terms of polling data that show a majority of GOP voters align with the Tea Party, but a growing majority of independents and, of course, Democrats do not.
That's right. So what you see is that among Republican voters, the Tea Party remains fairly strong. That depending on which poll you look at, usually around half or even sometimes a little over half of Republican voters nationwide indicate that they consider themselves supporters of the Tea Party. That doesn't mean they've done anything in the way of any kind of activity or giving money or anything like that. It just means that they sympathize with the Tea Party. And those Tea Party supporters among Republican voters are generally the most conservative Republican voters. And that support among Republicans has dropped a bit, but it's when we look at the overall electorate, we really see where the Tea Party has kind of taken a hit in recent months. Their support is at the lowest level that we've seen it in the overall electorate since it first appeared on the scene in 2009. And within the overall electorate, opponents of the Tea Party now outnumber supporters by a pretty good margin, and strong opponents outnumber strong supporters by a big margin. And of course, you find that among Democrats, there's almost no sympathy for the Tea Party. So it's very much it's become very much of a partisan kind of movement. It's almost entirely restricted to Republicans. And even there, it's lost a bit of the support that it had 2 or 3 years ago.
So is it safe to say the Tea Party activists are perhaps helping Republicans locally, and in pockets perhaps, but at the price of alienating a majority of those who traditionally vote Republican
That's
nationally?
Right. Yeah, I think that's right. I think the Tea Party retains a considerable influence in many of these red states and House districts where Republicans dominate the electorate, and among those Republicans, Tea Party supporters make up a very large proportion of Republican voters, and that influence is further enhanced by the fact that the Tea Party supporters generally are not only the most conservative supporters of the Republican Party, but they also tend to be among the most active members of the Republican Party or supporters of the Republican Party. They're more likely than other Republicans to vote in primaries, to donate money, to turn up at meetings and rallies, to attend caucuses, to do all the things that that really enhance your influence and make the elected representatives, I think, very concerned about, especially in these red states and districts, about not antagonizing these folks because that could put your seat at risk in those sorts of states and districts. And outside of these safe Republican states and districts, though, I think we're seeing the influence of the Tea Party has really waned, and I think you're seeing a greater willingness on the part of some Republicans who are particularly in more marginal states and districts, where they have to be at least somewhat concerned about appealing to Democrats and independents. These Republicans, I think, are a little more willing now to stand up to the Tea Party, and they're not quite as fearful, I think, as they were.
Mm-hmm. We're speaking with Alan Abramowitz, Alvin W. Barkley Professor of Political Science at Emory University, also the author of The Disappearing Center, Engaged Citizens, Polarization, and American Democracy. So Is this a battle for the future of the Republican Party as an electoral force, or maybe just a brief passing moment in the long history of the party?
No, I think that the emergence of the Tea Party, I think, was an outcome of a pretty long-term shift that we've seen in the kind of ideological composition of the Republican electoral coalition. We've seen Republican voters becoming more and more conservative, and particularly the more active Republican voters, the primary voters, and again those who donate and are work in campaigns and attend rallies and so on. They've moved pretty sharply to the right over the last not just few years, but over 20, 30, 40 years. So if you go back to the 1960s and 70s, we had a large number of moderate and even some liberal Republicans around. And today you just don't find those anymore. So this shift has had a big impact on the Republican Party already, and the question is just how much further can it go? Because what you're seeing right now is that even quite conservative Republican members of Congress being threatened by challengers from the right. So we now have, for example, that John Cornyn, very conservative Republican senator from Texas, being challenged from the right by an ultra-conservative Tea Party congressman named Steve Stockman. We're seeing that even Eric Cantor now, the Republican majority leader in the House of Representatives, second in command to John Boehner, is being challenged by he has an extremely conservative sort of Tea Party challenger in his district. Now that challenge may not get very far, but I find it interesting that even Republicans as conservative as Cornyn and Cantor can still face these sorts of primary challenges. So I think if we see that these challenges in the primaries coming up in 2014 are unsuccessful, if the Republican incumbents in particular who are being challenged from the right, Mitch McConnell, John Cornyn, Eric Cantor, and a number of others, if they can survive these challenges and beat them back, then I think that will suggest that the influence of the Tea Party within the Republican Party really is waning. If some of those challengers are successful, though, I think that will probably, indicate that the Tea Party is going to be around for a while.
Mm-hmm. It's something to even think that Cornyn and Cantor could be challenged from anywhere further than the right than they already are.
Exactly. I mean, how much further to the right can you be? And I think the basis of the challenge seems to be that they did things like, for example, in Cantor's case, he voted for the budget agreement.
Right.
And Cornyn may have as well. And so, any sign of willingness to cooperate with Democrats on anything, or any sign of willingness to, for example, compromise with the Obama administration, or to have anything positive to say at all about President Obama is taken as something that makes you worthy of a challenge. So that's why I think I think that's going to be become an issue in the Republican presidential primaries come 2016 if Chris Christie is running.
Mm-hmm. Now, again, we're speaking with Alan Abramowitz, professor of political science at Emory University, author of The Disappearing Center, Engaged Citizens, Polarization, and American Democracy. Given the success of the Tea Party that they've had in shifting the debate over the size of government, and given the seemingly increased powers of Congress to block the president, can't it remain a powerful force even if Democrats maintain a lock on the White House?
Yes, I think we've already seen that the Tea Party has been able to exert considerable pressure on the leadership in the House of Representatives, especially, and prevent, for example, things like immigration reform from coming to a vote. I don't think there's any doubt at this point that if the immigration reform bill that passed the Senate was allowed to come to a vote in the House of Representatives, that it would have a majority. But that majority would consist of almost all Democrats, along with a minority of Republicans who would support it. But I think because of the influence of the Tea Party and more generally of the conservative wing of the party, I think that the Speaker and the other leaders are reluctant to allow that to happen. You know, they've violated this so-called Hastert rule several times already, and you know, I think there's a concern that you know, if they have to do that again on an issue as contentious as immigration reform, that you know, ultimately this could lead to a revolt against the Speaker and possibly the election of a new Speaker. So, you know, I don't think that's very likely at this point, but I think that's one of the reasons why we're not seeing any progress on immigration reform.
What do you think can be done to restore competitiveness in House elections?
Yeah, it's a really tough thing. I mean, what concerns me is actually not so much the number of competitive districts. I think, you know, you're not going to get more than a fairly small minority of House districts that are going to be truly in play, you know, in any given election, depending on, you know, whether there's a national tide running in favor of one party or the other. You could have, you know, anywhere between, say, 30 or 40 to maybe up to 60 or 70 seats that are really in play. But that's enough, you know, to actually shift control of the House, and that's what's really important. It's whether there are enough seats in play to shift control of the House. The problem is that the way the current district lines were drawn after the 2010 census really makes it difficult for Democrats to win a majority of House seats. The you know, Republicans were able to use their control of redistricting in a large number of states, and especially in some of the key swing states like Ohio and Pennsylvania, Florida, and Virginia, to draw district lines, you know, that make it very difficult for Democrats to make any kind of real gains in the House. Now, over time, I think even within this current decade, that we may see that some of the advantage that Republicans gained from that redistricting will start to erode as a result of demographic shifts, population movement, and so on. But certainly the next cycle after the 2020 census is going to be a critical, and you know, I think hopefully Democrats have learned their lesson that you know, controlling those state legislatures and being able to draw those lines can have a big impact on the outcomes of congressional elections for years to come.
Mm-hmm. All right. Alan Abramowitz, Alvin W. Barkley Professor of Political Science at Emory University, the author of The Disappearing Center, Engaged Citizens, Polarization, and American Democracy. Professor, thank you so much for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org. We look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Very glad to be with you.
Thank you again. And this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future to keep this show on the air and help elect stand-up Democrats. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. And now, Bill Press and his guest, George Zornick of The Nation, on the continuing war in Afghanistan.
Washington pretty much shut down this week, but still some big issues floating around. George Zornick covers the Nation for the nation's capital for The Nation magazine. Joins us on our newsline this morning. Hey, George, good to talk to you again.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You, I know, recently have been writing. By the way, John Nichols was in yesterday for a whole hour. Don't know whether you've seen him since he's been in town, but
Terrific. No, I haven't, actually.
A good guy. And so we caught up with a couple of things. But one thing you've been writing about, we didn't talk to John about, was is Afghanistan. Are we really going to be able to get out of Afghanistan? That came up in the news conference between President Obama and Francois Hollande as well. Are we really going to be able to get out this year? And then what happens?
I really hope so. A lot of it depends on what you determine as getting out. Now the White House says that getting out means that they will declare combat operations over, but that they will sign a security agreement which will keep U.S. troops there until at least 2024, about 10,000 of them, and that these troops will still be allowed to do combat operations against things that the U.S. deemed as a terror threat. Now, in Afghanistan, you can apply terror threat to a wide variety of things, so most likely they would be doing semi-regular combat missions. So 10,000 troops in a country for 10 years doing combat missions, that's a war to most people.
That's a continuing war in Afghanistan, which would make it 20-year war instead of a 10-year war, right?
Right, and it's already the least popular war in U.S. history. It's been going on for 13 years. No one is really sure what the goal is. I mean, we went in saying we were going to overthrow the Taliban and root out al-Qaeda, and that has been accomplished. In fact, it was probably accomplished within the first year that we were there. So there's a growing sentiment in Congress that Obama should come to them before he signs the security agreement and ask for a vote. It's not something he's legally required to do, but it's something they want him to do.
But isn't it also true that, Hamid Karzai, the president of Afghanistan, has refused to sign the security agreement anyhow, right?
Yeah, that's right. He wants to wait until after a new president is elected. He's no longer able to run, and he doesn't want to, at least what he says is he doesn't want to foist this agreement on a new leader. And of course, he has other concerns about the drone strikes and the night raids that are happening. So whether it's signed on their end is one question, but there are people like Jeff Merkley, Democrat from Oregon, and Mike Lee, a Republican from Utah, who want some input before this thing gets signed.
I can't believe that the American people would support another 10 years in Afghanistan. In fact, I know they would not. Right?
I would be shocked if Congress voted yes on that. I mean, the war is so deeply and broadly unpopular. When you talk to some of these senators, they say it's actually the thing that they hear about most when they go back home, because people are still reading about these casualties in the paper and saying, what are we doing there? What's going on?
We're talking with George Zornick from The Nation, thenation.com. George, also, most people have thrown in the towel and given up on immigration reform. You think it might still be possible that House Republicans might come to their senses this year?
I think now is the best time, the most likely time that could happen.
Really?
You're out. You hear Boehner and McConnell out there kind of throwing cold water on it, but that's sort of the dance that they have to do. They can't say, "Oh, yes, we'd love to do this." They're kind of playing to the conservative base, but at the same time, they are making, and particularly in the House, is making some subtle but real moves towards reform. And they kind of have to do it now. I feel like they're waiting until some of the Republican primaries are over for the midterm elections. So in other words, before some right-wing candidate can knock off someone for their immigration vote. But the party bosses they see the writing on the wall. They want to get it done. And they know that if it doesn't happen this year, you wait until 2015, all of a sudden you're throwing yourself into the presidential primaries, and then things get really polarized, really tricky. So I'm not sure if it's going to happen, but I know that the people at the top of the party want it to happen, and I would expect to see some kind of movement this year.
Yeah, and I guess it's not impossible in that, John Boehner has said there's not going to be any immigration reform legislation this year. Yeah, but he also said we're never going to raise the debt ceiling without getting something for it, right? We're never going to. We're going to have. We want something. We're not sure what it is, but we want something. Yeah, and so he totally flip flopped on that. He could flip flop on immigration too, right?
Sure, and you saw the debt ceiling pass with majority of Democrats and a small number of Republicans. That could certainly be a template for immigration reform. And there may be some other games. There may be a path to citizenship that they call something else that may be semantic, and they'll say, oh, this is an amnesty. But in effect, it does give people a route, people who are here and undocumented, a route to being citizens.
Well, I must admit, I had kind of given up on it this year, but you convinced me that it's good logic, good thinking, that it might play just the opposite of what people are saying today. George, thanks for getting up early for us this morning. Appreciate it, your time, and we always send people to thenation.com and join me as a subscriber. Thanks, George.
That's all for americasdemocrats.org. Thank you to all who made today's show possible. Jonathan Allen, Alan Abramowitz, and the entire Bill Press team. And thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, please get involved in our efforts to keep this show going and to elect Democrats who are bringing the party back to its roots. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. And be sure to find 21st Century Democrats on Facebook. For americasdemocrats.org, I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Join us, support the show, and help elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles with your contribution today. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate.